Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Educated Colin Snap Channel. How you doing? So today we're gonna break down the hot location for today. It is Sokovia. This location is discard a card from each player's hand. This is very on brand for this month since Modork is the season pass this month. There's definitely going to be a lot of discard players that are going to come out of the woodworks because of this location, hot location. So definitely be aware of that. But I don't think you really have to worry too much about it. Just be careful for your cards, right? Make sure that you don't get surprised or you play that you're expecting, oh, I might lose a card here. So as long as you do that, I think this is a reasonable location for a hot location and not something that will be crazy. I do think this does change how you approach games, right? So the opponent losing a key card could be the reason that you snap, or you losing a key card could be the reason why you play defensively, look for any opportunity to leave. So it's not a game breaking location in terms of deck building, but it might be a game breaking location in terms of how you react to how this location affects the board states and your hand states. But as always, we do have some cards to think about if you want to make a new deck for this. You don't have to here, but you can take advantage of it. Discards are the most obvious thing. So let's take a look at some of the core discard options. First of all, you have Morbius, right? You get the free 2 power. The nice thing about Morbius is you don't have to have this on the board when you lose the card. So you can just top deck this turn 4, turn 5, and just play it down with the power increase. So that's going to be really nice. Wolverine and Swarm are pretty obvious cards because they do get buffed when, or they do get summoned or buffed when they get discarded. So that's going to be very easy. Stature as well. I think Stature is like the real winner of this location. If you have Stature already, you can pretty much put this in your deck willy-nilly, right? Like this kind of gives me death vibes, where some of the other locations you were able to just play death in your deck without any synergy, and you're like, well, if the location pops up, I get to play a 1 mana death or a 1 mana or 0 mana death, right? I think Stature kind of falls in the same bracket, where if Sokovia pops up, you just get to play a 1 mana 7 power card out of nowhere. So I think that's going to be a real big winner. If you have this card already, you can definitely abuse that. But moving on to more stuff, I think Ghost Rider is also going to be a pretty powerful tool. If your deck is very heavy curved, you hit the Sokovia. Sokovia drops a big card you really don't mind losing. Then you just Ghost Rider it down and get this powerful swing. So I think that's going to be a really nice tool there. If you want to abuse that mechanic, you can run Ghost Rider in a heavy curve deck. Hellcarrier Apocalypse, right? Those are pretty good cards to get discarded. Hellcarrier will get a little bit stronger, and well, Apocalypse will get a little stronger. Hellcarrier will give you more cards. And then Hella, once again, it's kind of like Ghost Rider, just a little bit more effort you have to put into crafting a deck that can make that work, but it's going to be a lot easier to get big things if they're already being removed from your hand. And then just Modork, just taking advantage of the location. If it's a swarm, you can Modork again, get more swarms and do things like that. So that's going to be pretty cool. And I think Moon Knight is actually pretty effective here when you can double dip on the discards, right? Like your opponent might be expecting that one discard, but they won't be expecting that double discard. So I think you can really catch some people off guard, snap before you play Moon Knight, really discard their key cards and make their lives miserable. So that's kind of how I would be approaching it from a discard angle, just taking advantage of those resources and trying to find easy tech in, Stature being number 1 and then Ghost Rider being kind of number 2, and then depending on like whether I want to fully commit to a discard or not, I could work with some of the other tools available. Next up, we have these non-discard centric tools, but I do think they do have a bit of advantage. So here we have some card draw. If you're drawing cards or generating cards, it's going to be a lot harder for um, the game or the location to discard a core card, right? That's always the worry. They discard a core card, and then I basically have to leave because I really need that card to win. So if you just keep generating, whether it's Agent 13 or Sentinel or whatever, you just get um an increased chance that the location doesn't screw you over, which it's gonna happen eventually. Agent Colstein and Moon Girl are more of the opposite ends of the card generation spectrum, where you say, okay, as long as this card doesn't get discarded, I can refill my hand. I can make new options. I can find something to play. So they don't save you from the discard, but they do give you options after the discard and can make it work. Same thing with Absorbing Man. I do think Absorbing Man you could play if you're already running a very on reveal centric deck. This can give you more options, give you card generation, or kind of fits into whatever you want it to be doing in your deck list. Crystal, I wouldn't run, but it does kind of work if you wanted to play some type of Zabu synergistic deck where maybe you can run this for 3 mana and then it feels a little bit better, where you refill your hand after you maybe discard a lot of your tools. Strong Guy, I think, is going to be very easy to proc in this hot location since you're already losing a card. It's already very easy to make sure your hand is empty, but if you're also losing extra card, this ends up being a 4 mana 10, which is pretty powerful. Now here we have Rock Slide. Rock Slide, I think, can be sneaky good in this location because they're going to be losing a lot of their initial cards, and they're going to have to be relying on draw, right? Same thing with Cog, right? They're going to be losing a lot of those starting 3 cards, 4 cards they start with, and then they're going to be like, okay, I need to top deck my answer. I need to top deck my next card because I've discarded a lot of my tools. Then if they start drawing rocks, that's really going to feel very bad. So I think rocks are going to be a lot more powerful in a deck in this day, just because those rocks are going to feel more impactful because they have less tools overall. Same thing with Black Bolt. Black Bolt's kind of like Moon Knight in terms of discarding. It feels a lot worse when they're double discarding, right? You lose 1 card, you're like, okay, I can work with this. But you lose 2 cards, and if any of them are key, that can be a big, big deal. And then Dr. Octopus, I think, just feels nicer because there's going to be less things that you can pull, right? And you also kind of know what type of deck they're going to be having, right? So another nice thing about this location is you're kind of seeing what deck archetype they're bringing, right? So with it's just like Yondu, you get a sneak peek into their archetype. So if you know, oh, this archetype doesn't want to play these cards early, or they're playing like a Carnage, or a Death Wave or something, right? This Dr. Octopus can do a lot of damage. So you have that foresight. You get to see what they're working with. Then you can decide whether this Dr. Octopus is good or bad into the game state, basically. And then the last card we have is the Invisible Woman. I think Invisible Woman is going to be really nice because what happens when you play Invisible Woman in this hot location? They're going to be instantly thinking, oh, they're playing discard, right? They're playing some type of Hela Cosmo, or not Hela, but Hela Modark discard deck. Then you can surprise them, right? You can play something else, but they're going to assume that you're discard. And that assumption can really bite them in the butt if you're not doing that. So I think you can play Invisible Woman and then not play a discard deck. And they're going to be assuming, oh, you're doing that. They might play a Cosmo there. But let's say you're just an ongoing deck with Onslaught or something. You go like Omega Red Onslaught. They're not going to play around that, and you're going to get that effective surprise mechanic there. So I really do think Invisible Woman could be a sneaky way to get some wins. They're going to be assuming one thing, but you surprise them with a different deck list. So I definitely think that is a card you could build around if you want to do something fun for this hot location. So, and then last thing I have here is just like cards you want to be thinking about or avoiding. Essentially, I think Agatha is the clear one. even though you could argue that, oh, Agatha might get discarded early, so it's not a big downside. A lot of times when you're playing Agatha, the big payoff is like Ghost Ridering it back or something like that. But if the Sokovia just discards a different card, right, then the payoff of Agatha isn't even there. And Agatha in general isn't the strongest card anyway, so you're not really giving yourself a head start in terms of playing the game if you're starting with an Agatha composition. That's my opinion, but I think it's pretty accurate. And then the card reliant engines as Devil Sword and Ronin, I think it's going to be a lot harder to have a consistent hand, especially if they discard your card generation or they discard your Devil Sword or Ronin itself, right? It's just going to be hard to really make that work for you. Every game where the location pops up, you're gonna have a lot less power, and it's gonna be impactful. So I would just be careful if you're running these type of deck builds that you are just either adding more generation or just being aware that, okay, if I lose Devil Sword or if I lose my card generation, do I have all the alternatives, right? Things like She-Hulk Arrow really help with that kind of downswing or unluckiness in terms of the art location RNG. And then the last one is just premium or key cards that you don't want to lose early, right? So if you lose Mr. Negative, if that gets discarded, you basically lost the game. And there's a lot of those type of cards, those key cards that you have to play on the board or the game's over. Cerebro is another one, right? Those type of decks will feel a lot worse because already the deck is hard to get to pop off, right? Mr. Negative decks are already hard to get that curve perfectly. And then you're adding this extra RNG chance of, oh, it hits your Zabu, so now your negative is laid, or it hits the negative, and now the opponent knows your game plan, and the opponent knows it's over, right? So you those archetypes that are pretty obvious to know what's being played if that card is discarded. Same thing with Patriot, right? If Patriot gets discarded, oh, your opponent knows exactly what you're doing, and you don't have Patriot, it's basically over. So I would try to avoid those type of deck builds in this hot location just because they're so vulnerable. So I don't normally have like cards to avoid, but I do think for this one, where your opponent gets to see a little bit of your strategy, it's good to have that recommendation. So overall, that is this hot location. I don't think it's something you have to build around or really develop a strategy around. You just have to be aware that you have extra game win conditions besides that one that could get discarded. And always be aware that as soon as you discard a card, your opponent will have a sneak peek into your game plan. And if your game plan becomes obvious based on that discard, you have to maybe reevaluate how you want to approach the rest of the game. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.